Miss Curtin left the university, did she not?
Yes.
And then there was a search that was conducted to replace Miss Curtin, correct?
There was.
And there was a search committee that was formed?
Yes.
And is that another position that was posted at the university?
It would have been posted through Mr. May's department.
Right, so that goes, you can go online and see what positions are available at San Diego State University, and that's the kind of position that you might see posted on the website, correct?
Yes.
And the search committee for that position included Tammy Reese, one of your assistant coaches?
Yes.
And do you know who else was on that committee?
I do not.
And Mr. May, it was his department, so did you understand Mr. May would have the final say on who was hired for the position?
Mr. May had said this was a primarily women's basketball hire, so he wanted us to be able to make the final decision. He thought that was important.
Well, the individual who is hired would also have responsibilities other than women's basketball. True?
I would believe so, yes.
Were there members of other coaching staffs on the search committee?
For this position,
Yes.
I'm unaware, Mr. Noonan, who else was on who narrowed it down.
So then, I take it the field was ultimately narrowed to fill the position, and interviews were conducted with the candidates.
I remember two to three.
And when it got to the point where 2 to 3 candidates were being interviewed, do I understand correctly that you participated in the interview?
Yes, I was asked to spend a half hour with each candidate.
And at the conclusion, is it correct that the person selected for the position was a young woman from Riverside?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
And did you then come to understand that that woman, for whatever reason, turned the job down?
I was told that, yes.
And then you were advised that the position had been offered to Mr. Soline?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
You were then advised that the position was being offered to Mr. Soline?
I was advised that, yes.
And then when as I understand your direct testimony, you objected to the position going to Mr. Soline, correct?
Yes, we had given feedback after the interviews in our offices.
And then you had one of the problems you had with Mr. Soline was that he was a male, correct?
Yes.
And you felt that the position should go to a female, correct?
There were no females in that office, and I felt strongly that we should have a female in that office.
Well, let me ask you this. Are you sure there weren't other females in the office?
There were no females that were working in media relations. There was a female administrative assistant when you first walked in.
And did you come to learn that the administrative assistant was going to be elevated so that that person was then involved in media relations activities for teams?
I wouldn't say come to learn, no.
Well, did you discuss that with Mr. Sturck?
I did.
And didn't he give you some information to the effect that this woman was going to be doing more than simply being a receptionist, but was going to be doing media relations work?
He said, I think she's going to get some sports. And I said, is she going to move into Peggy's office?
Mr. Soline was going to move into Peggy's office, right?
Well, this was before Mr. Soline was hired.
I thought you went to speak to Mr. Sturck once you learned that Mr. Soline was going to be hired. That's not correct.
He hadn't been offered. I was told that he was going to be offered the job. So before he was offered the job, I wanted to voice my reasons as to why he shouldn't be offered the job. When I went to Mr. Sturck's office after being to Mike's office, Mr. May's office, and John David Wicker's office, I said to Mr. Sturck, there are no women in that office. We have 13 women's sports. And he said, well, there's Victoria. She's in that office. And I said, she's the administrative assistant. She sits in the front. And he said, I believe we're going to assign her some sports. So I said, is she going to then move into Peggy Curtin's office and be a full-time media relations person, getting another administrative assistant? And he said he didn't know.
Now, you don't have any, do you believe that the most qualified candidate should have been hired for the position?
I do.
And you believe that the most qualified candidate should be hired for the position, whether that person is male or female, correct?
I do.
And apparently someone, Mr. May, or someone believed that Mr. Soline was the second most qualified person for the position, correct?
Mr. May must have, yes.
And you disagree with that?
Yes, I did.
And then Mr. Soline, that was very close to the start of the season, was it not, that Mr. Soline was hired?
Very close.
And but he functioned as the media relations person for women's basketball in the 2012-2013 season?
He might have missed the start, but close to. I remember Thanksgiving around that time.
And did he have other sports responsibilities during the time period he was working on women's basketball? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you. The issue I wanted to ask you about was this issue of the sports, the banners.
Yes.
There was some discussion on your direct examination about banners, and I want you to take a look at what's marked as Exhibit 150. I don't know if you have that. You can put it on that screen. I don't think there's an objection. We don't show an objection. It was marked as exhibit number 150, and you could go down to the bottom here, Kayla. No. Oh, wow. I'm going to read that. Let's go back up to the top. And let's go to the second email there. Thank you, sir. This is in the 2009 time period. Mr. Briner is telling Mr. Schall, Mr. May, Mr. Overhelp, and Ms. Bramer the subject is basketball banners. He said, per our meeting last week, I asked the sign shop to mock up the following. And then there's several different banners that are being indicated there, correct?
I have that email, yes.
And one of them was back to 1997 when you left the university in 97. There was no women's basketball banner put up for the NCAA's participation.
I'm not sure.
Didn't you understand that in 2009 they were going to put up a banner commemorating the women's team in 1997's participation in the NCAA tournament?
There's a permanent NCAA banner, and they were adding that year to the 96, 95. It was adding to a current banner, yes?
Right.
Yeah. Yes, I'm aware.
And then there was one here is the creation of a new women's basketball banner to indicate Mountain West champions and NCAA second round 2009 and one banner, and that related to the previously completed season. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so the jury can understand what we're talking about. If you would go to page 2.
Excuse me.
And if you could you could bring that up. And this isn't very clear, but what it's supposed to denote is champions, Mountain West, women's basketball 2009, and I believe this is the NCAA
Logo, yes.
logo. Okay. So this was the banner that's at least being proposed in this email to be added to the existing banners, I guess, on the east side of the A-House Arena.
Yes.
And as I understand it, your concern about this was that you thought there should be separate banners, one for Mountain West Conference champions and one for the NCAA?
As tradition and history in our sport dictates, when you win a championship, you get a banner for that championship.
So, but I have your concern, if I set that forth correctly, you wanted separate banners for the NCAA?
We wanted a single banner for our championship and the NCAA banner to be separate.
Would that be on a separate long banner?
Yes.
And so there was some back and forth, and there was some discussion with Mr. Overhelman. Is that when he informed you that there was going to be a project underway to revamp all the banners in the A-House Arena?
That was his intent. That he discussed with me that was his intent.
Right. And so his position was that you or a donor or no one should spend extra funds for extra banners because they were all going to be revamped. Words to that effect. That was his position. Right?
That was his final answer, yes.
And you and he had a disagreement about that. Is that correct?
Yes, I offered to pay for it myself for our team.
Or have a donor pay.
Or have done any of the above. Not use our operating budget to do it.
Right. And with respect to the revamping of all the banners in VA House, did you understand Mr. Overhelman to say that they were going to do some fundraising for that?
I understood him to say that they planned on redoing the banners.
Did you understand that they planned to do some fundraising to do the revamping?
He didn't get into that.
Let's just briefly go to the April 16th, 2016, 2013 meeting. That was the meeting in Mr. Sturck's office involving Mr. Wicker, Ms. Thaler, and yourself, correct?
Yes.
And was that the only time you had a meeting with Ms. Thaler?
Face to face, yes.
And as I understand, the meeting started early in the morning.
8 a.m.
How long did the meeting last?
I went straight home. I got home a little before 11. I approximately about 2 hours, 15 minutes, 2 hours. About 8 to 10.
And did you understand that Ms. Thaler's role in that meeting was a human resources and HR role? That is, that's why she was there?
Due respect, I didn't know that meeting was even coming, so I wasn't sure why she was there at all.
Okay, but when you were there, did you come to understand that she was there because of her HR or human resources background?
I didn't know that it was. I didn't know she was HR. I knew she was an administrative person. I didn't know exactly of which she came from, but her folder contained HR information.
Right. And the folder that she had at some point in time in the meeting, she went over the materials in the folder, did she not?
She didn't go over everything in the folder. No, she went over the term sheet, and then I didn't understand the fired, hired, retired. So she went over that, but did she go through page by page, brochure by brochure? She did not.
Did you ask her questions about the materials that she was showing you from her folder?
Yes.
And do you recall how much time you spent, or Ms. Thaler and you spent talking about the materials in her folder?
Well, I wouldn't say it was Ms. Thaler and myself. I was speaking mostly to Mr. Stirk, since he's the only I knew him, and I really didn't know Ms. Thaler. So we kind of had some back and forth on some of the issues. The term sheet is one of them. My exit is another of them. Talking to the athletes. How do I talk to the athletes? How do I talk to my coaches? How do I arrange for, it wasn't just go through these folder points. There was lots of different discussions.
What I was getting at with respect to, say, the retirement issue, that was an issue that was an issue to which Ms. Thaler spoke. Is that correct?
She did.
Did you ask her questions about the retirement issues?
Yes, I asked her to explain it.
And did you understand that your pension at that time was administered by the CalPERS system, the state system?
I really didn't, Mr. Noonan. I knew that I had retirement. I knew that it was a retirement policy, but as I hadn't studied anything about retirement, so it came at me kind of quick.
All right. And then at some point in time during the meeting, there was a discussion of a press release that was to be issued.
Yes.
And you were shown a draft press release, correct?
Yeah, I was pushed right across that picture of me on the top, and it said Mike May at the top.
And you were asked to review it and provide some edits, some input, things of that nature. Is that correct?
I was asked if I was okay if it was okay with me if they were to go with this.
All right. And what did you say?
No.
And so did you then scratch out or line out some of the portions of the draft?
Nothing to the draft. They had put in quotes something that I said, and I didn't think it was fair for someone else to write what I'd say.
But you did edit, you did make some edits or something with a pen or a pencil.
A quote from myself.
Correct. Okay. And then Mr. Wicker read it back to you? What you'd written?
He did.
Now, am I correct that during the course of this meeting, no one in the meeting raised their voice or yelled? Is that correct?
That would be correct.
As you didn't do that, Mr. Stirk didn't do it, Ms. Thaler didn't do it, Mr. Wicker didn't do it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And at some point in time, you indicated that you wanted to speak to your lawyer, correct?
Yes.
That is, there were some papers for there that had been presented to you for approval and possible signature, and you decided at the meeting that you weren't going to sign anything that day, correct?
Well, when I heard video surveillance, I was shook up. I didn't trust what was going on, and I didn't trust the room. So I didn't feel I was savvy enough or in a state of mind enough to process any of what was getting thrown at me. So I said, I believe that I need to find an attorney and see what the right thing is to do here, because I didn't, again, the sole cause struck a subordinate was said at least 8-9 times throughout this meeting. I didn't know who was the subordinate, who I supposedly struck, or who the video was. So you have to, if you could be in my mind, it was hard for me to just be talking about a term sheet when I still didn't know why we were doing it. So I felt that I needed to have an attorney.
Okay, and I'm not arguing with you about it. I'm just saying there was a discussion of a term sheet. And
right, but
you made the decision, that's fine, that you didn't want to sign anything that day, and you didn't sign anything that day.
Well, as it was explained to me in that portion, it was a stock sheet. It wasn't really applicable to me, and that's when Rochelle Thaler said, "This is just an idea. You can manipulate this however you want. Get your attorney. Decide what points are important for you. You might want Mr. Stirk to write you a letter of recommendation." And Mr. Stirk nodded his head. Yes, I can write a letter of recommendation. That wasn't, I don't believe, in the term sheet. So you take this to your attorney, get your term sheet, get it signed, and we'll solve this, but you no longer work at San Diego State University. So we have to decide what to do next.
I understand. So I'm just getting to the point where, for the reasons stated, you decided not to sign anything that day, and you were going to take it with you, think about it, get an attorney, and then decide what to do next.
What I should do. Correct.
And And that's the way the meeting ended. You left without signing anything. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you located counsel. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you had counsel in place by the next day. Is that correct?
I met him for the first time the next day, or we didn't. That took a little bit.
Right. And then, am I also correct that there was a press release did go out?
I had till 2 p.m. Pacific time before the press release was going out.
Can we put up, I'm going to show you Exhibit 506.
No, no objection.
Take a look at Exhibit 506, and we're going to have to bring that up. And in this, do you recognize Exhibit 506 as the press release that was put out by San Diego State University on or about April 16th, 2013?
I'm going to peek at it if I could. That's the quote that I remember writing,
Which one is it? You can tell me.
where it starts my 16 years at San Diego State University.
Right here.
Yes.
So this is the portion of the press release that you, I guess, inserted or edited?
I didn't read any of the rest of it at the time, Mr. Noonan. I just was uncomfortable with someone else writing a quote for myself.
Right. I just want to nail, this is from starting with my 16 years and ending in San Diego.
Thank you, San Diego.
That's what you inputted into the press release.
Correct.
And then, as I recall it, then I think you testified subsequently you did decide to elect retirement with CalPERS.
Yes.
And you were, when you left San Diego State University, you were, strike that. So when you go to USC and get benefits, that's from a different pension plan, correct? That's not CalPERS, correct?
Correct.
And did you ever see any press release or quote in the newspapers or in the public media from San Diego State University stating to the effect that you had been fired for either striking a subordinate or because of historically poor relationships with colleagues and staff? Did you ever hear anybody from San Diego State University say anything like that in the newspaper?
Due respect, from that day forward, I never looked at the UT.
So the answer is you've never seen anyone?
I've never seen or followed anything about any of this.
But to your knowledge, San Diego State never went out and told people, strike that, in the media, public media. When I say anybody from San Diego State, there's 30,000 people, so I don't know that I can vouch for everyone. But you never saw anyone from San Diego State, or to your knowledge, you never heard that they went out into the media and told people that you were fired for striking a subordinate, or because you had poor working relationships with colleagues and staff.
Through
I'm sorry. Compound spraying, false speculation, lax foundation.
through the media? One part was through the media.
Through the media.
So through the media, to the best of my knowledge, trying to not follow the media, I would say that's correct. I did not see that.
that, I have no further questions at this time. Ms. Burns, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Right.
I'll be ready in just a moment. I can collect some things here, Your Honor. Then we have those for counsel. Is that right, Your Honor?
Well, you can't have any. It's not for you.
Thank you. Let's go to your testimony, Coach Burns, about Ms. Bramer. And your feelings about her in terms of her effectiveness. You recall that?
Yes.
Now, as a person, did you know Jenny Bramer personally or not?
Not well.
Okay. Had you ever had discussions with her that were of a personal nature? Were you all
Of course. Yes.
kind of kicked back and talked Beth to Jenny? Did you do that?
Not a lot. I mean, she had a couple children and things like that well through her tenure, so conversations of family and things like that, yes.
All right. If we could get up Exhibit 201. Actually, I want to change my mind there. I want to go to Exhibit. Let me get these in order here. Okay, let's go to Exhibit 150. 150. We're talking about the banners here, Coach Burns.
Okay.
And this is an email string dated October 22nd, 2009. It starts out earlier in the day, but it comes down to a discussion of the cost of the banners that you were wanting. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And then we go forward to exhibit number 200.
And that cost was for all the banners, right? For all the banners.
All banners meaning
That was for the men's NIT. That cost was for all the banners.
for that year. Is
For that year,
correct?
yeah.
Okay. The women's basketball banners, what was the cost of them, if you recall?
I don't have my exhibit in front of me, but
Let's go to exhibit 200.
That's stipulated on the list.
No objection.
All right.
I remember 800. I don't remember why I remember 800 as to 2 at 400 or 1 at 800, but I remember that.
All right. Let's look at exhibit 200. And it's, I want to go to the middle email. October 29, 2009. And they give you the revised proof there, correct?
Yes,
They give you a choice, logos and so forth, correct?
yes,
And then we go to the top, and here is Jenny Bramer to Don Oberhelman saying, one last effort. You realize it's less than $400 for the additional banner. You see that?
I do.
Now, was that for the second banner for either the NIT, either the NCAA or the Mountain West Championship?
I don't know for which, but to have two instead of one, it was an additional $400.
All right.
That's what I
Now,
remember.
and then we go to Exhibit 201, the first email dated November 2, 2009, from Jenny Bramer to you and Tammy Stevens, which says, I'm still hopping mad, but I know you will spin how this one banner is even better than the men's since it has NCAA on it, JV. Do you recall discussions with Ms. Bramer about her being concerned about you're not being able to get two banners?
Yes, and she was in the meetings with Mr. Oberhelman as well.
All right. Now, when you say that Ms. Bramer was ineffective, what are you talking about? Can you give us some examples of what you mean by that?
Well, this example where, this is just one example, but it was, she wasn't given the respect to get something done. It was $400 to have a second banner, and she was unable to do that.
Okay.
And the media guides, that's another issue area.
Okay. Let's, you mentioned media guide. Let's go to exhibit number 190. With respect to the, we'll blow it up here for you.
Okay.
In just a minute. With respect to media guides, back in November of 2007, were you going to Jenny Bramer for issues for the women's basketball program?
Yes.
Take a look at Exhibit 190, and let's go to the middle email on that page, the November 21, 2007 email, 2:52 p.m. And you are sending this to Jenny Bramer, correct?
Yes.
This deals with media guides, correct?
Yes.
And what was the discussion that was going on in the athletic department between you and Ms. Bramer relative to media guides in November of 2007?
Well, media guides are targeted to be done prior to your season from purely the standpoint that they were created for media. So when you go to your team media day, you have your guide there for the media outlets from all the other conference teams. It also was the only, at that time, rules have changed, it was the only color piece of recruiting material that we were allowed to have. It was by NCAA rule. You could have one color piece, and it was this media recruiting guide. So it had kind of morphed into a very, very important recruiting piece. As you can imagine, in a city as beautiful as ours, it's our only color guide, so we could put inside covers of the Coronado Bridge, sunsets, etc. It was a really important recruiting piece, and at that time was something that you could send out to young prospects to be able to introduce them to your program. So there was a big recruiting component to it beyond the media component.
Did you talk with Ms. Bramer about that component, the recruiting component.
Yes, and I detailed it for them to make them aware, because this was the second year, I believe, that this had occurred, that they were late.
All right. And in the top email, on November 21, Ms. Bramer writes to you and says, understood and agree. She's responding to your prior email, is she not?
Yes.
Understood, and I agree. I'm not sure that we can push any faster at this point for this year, but we will try. The delay must have been way back in the summer. Have I read that accurately?
Yes.
Now, did you escalate this or elevate this to a level above Ms. Bramer? Did you go to Mr. Schimmel with this ultimately?
Yes, because it was the second year in a row, and I didn't think she wasn't trying, but nothing was getting done, so I thought it would be important to bring it to his attention.
Let's go to exhibit number 191. Page 2. Is this it? Can you see it okay, ma'am?
As soon as you do that magic blow up, I'm good. Got it.
Okay, is this an email from you to Jeff Schimmel dated December 13, 2007?
Yes.
And just in essence, without reading through it, are you expressing your displeasure to Mr. Schimmel with the media guide delay?
Yes, and it was pointing out what we needed it for, and that, and compared it to the other schools in our league, that our team was looking at other schools' media guides in our locker room and saying, where's ours, where's ours, where's ours? So,
Right. And you copied Ms. Bramer on your email to Mr. Schimmel, correct?
yes,
Mr. Schimmel was her boss, right?
yes.
All right. So let's go to the first page of Exhibit 191. And there's a series of emails here from Mr. Schimmel to Mike May inquiring about the media guides, correct?
Yes,
And then Ms. Bramer follows up on December 17 with an email. And then Mr. Schimmel on January the 12th, 2008, at the top. Mr. Schimmel writes to Ms. Bramer and says, yes, and the plan is that will not happen again. You see that?
I do.
And that was in response to Ms. Bramer's email to him.
From the November email, I believe, or?
The December 17
December.
email, the one in the middle.
Okay.
Email in the middle. So Ms. Bramer writes to Mr. Schimmel and asks if Mike May responded. She said, I'm curious, and so forth. Mr. Schimmel responds, yes, and it's not going to happen again. So you had initiated and brought Mr. Schimmel into the discussion. Is that correct?
Right, when
Yeah.
she wasn't getting a response.
Why does this, in your mind, show that Jimmy Bramer was ineffective?
Because she wasn't not trying, she just wasn't having that, like she says in her email, I'm curious what Mike May said. I asked him a while back and he didn't respond, so she wasn't able to get responses to the issue.
Earlier in your testimony with Mr. Noonan examining you, you said that you didn't get any psychological counseling in the year between when you were fired and when you got your job at USC. You recall that?
I did.
Why didn't you do that?
Well, you probably need a counselor to explain why I couldn't get counseling. I don't know. I think it's just really not the way I thought would be the right thing to do. And most importantly, as I tried to state earlier, I was very afraid about future finance. I had never been in that kind of situation before. I didn't know what it cost. I didn't know if it was covered. I just was trying to keep my focus on trying to get a job.
That's your reason.
Yeah, I gave myself a calendar year to try to be as normal as I could, and after that point, then I have to figure out Plan B, but that was Plan A.
A couple of times when Mr. Noonan was questioning you, you talked about the time of the year when you were fired and the impact that had on your job search. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Will you explain for the jury why the time of the year was important to you or for you in trying to find a job?
Because the hiring cycle is, as you can imagine, we work the school year, the calendar year. So people step down in early March most frequently, and so March is a very fluid, competitive time of year in basketball. Once it's past March, it takes an atypical circumstance as the one that I talked about at UT San Antonio, where there was a tragedy and a job came open. There were no jobs open, and there wouldn't be jobs open until the next hiring cycle. So you had to sit out a year is the term I think people use.
Okay. And that was your experience, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. You talked about having two houses.
Well, I didn't talk about that. Yes.
Well,
yes.
okay. We're going to talk about it now.
Okay.
Do you have two houses?
I don't really have any houses. I have a condo in San Diego, and I have an apartment in LA.
Do you own either one of those?
No, sir. I rent.
And since you're working in Los Angeles, and that's where your job is, why are you keeping a rental condo here in San Diego?
San Diego's my home. San Diego's where I've lived most of my professional life and had fully intended to do that. At the time when all of a sudden, you know, one day you get up and you go to work and your whole world changes, I wanted the opportunity. I would have had to call that counselor if I had to lose my home too. I bought my car, and I say that because I've been provided a courtesy car, and I just thought, if I open the door tomorrow and my car's gone, what is happening? So I bought my car. I would have liked to have told you I bought my condo, but everybody in this room knows that that's not something as easily to do as buying a car. I bought my car. I kept my condo. I didn't know what was going to come next. I had a 1-year contract at SC. I certainly didn't envision what I'm doing, but I wanted to hold on to my home. And I come home on the weekends, and I come home late at night and get up in the morning, and I run, and then I head back up, and I love and appreciate everything in LA. And I originally was going to commute, but that was a bad idea. It was physically impossible to try to do. So I compromised with getting as small a place as I could for during the week.
Okay. It was discussed with you on cross-examination by counsel that the women's basketball program at San Diego wasn't carrying its weight. Do you recall that inquiry?
I sure do.
Do you have any belief as to whether the women's basketball team at San Diego State brought value to that installation during your tenure as the women's head basketball coach for second staff?
I do.
What is it?
Well, you know, I believe that my job, I'm hired to raise other people's children, teach them about basketball, aspire to win championships and to graduate, and I think that the lessons learned from when we first arrived in '05 and didn't win a game to what we achieved in 2010 when that same people in that locker room were cutting down the nets at a Sweet 16. I believe the first San Diego State women's team for sure to ever do that. What they learned going through that, what they learned to build something, the self-esteem that they learned, the opportunity to be role models in the community, the opportunity to, I was asked and gladly spoke at Kiwanis, at Rotaries, at Girl Scouts, at Boy Scouts, for the Campanile Foundation, for the Aztec Athletic Fund. Always told that I was a great ambassador for San Diego State. At the Del Mar County Fair, I could go on and on. I was told that what we did was important. And I'll stand by that. I'll stand by that with the years of graduates, of athletes that were in that program and what they were doing then and what they were like then and what they're doing now. It has value, but obviously not enough at the turnstile.
You talked a while ago about a targeted athlete. And can you explain for us exactly what you mean by a targeted athlete?
A targeted athlete means that they were admitted to the university under different circumstances than a, quote, normal admit, for bad choice of words. There were certain parameters that had to be met and followed through with a targeted athlete, and that was a conditional admit, maybe would be a good way to describe it.
Is there a process that you as the head coach has to go through in order to get a targeted athlete admitted to San Diego State?
Yes.
Is academic support one of the functions that has to be involved in order for you to do that?
They're the point person on admissions. We have nothing to do with it. We as coaches have nothing to do with the admissions office.
I appreciate that, but does academic support have any role?
Yes, that the athlete in question, Colleen Evans, was the director of academic services at the time. We assess the student as a person, home life, etc., and then we bring that to, in this case, it was Colleen Evans who was the director, and it was Jay Larson, who's our compliance person, because there's a compliance component too. Those were the two people that we left it in their hands, and then they took it forward. We didn't have discussions beyond that. But both of them wrote letters to the NCAA in support of this athlete admission.
Another area that was covered with you either today or Thursday was academics and the incentive in your contract for grade point average. That's my shorthand discussion. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Was the fact that you could get money if your players had good grades, was that the only thing that motivated you to have them perform well academically?
No.
Why not?
Well, it's a university, and the purpose of what we're doing is having people come to graduate. On the women's side, the highest paid WNBA player coming out of college is slotted to receive $100,000. That's the max salary. You don't even need an agent. It's slotted for you. Education is the single most important component of what we do, and thanks to Title IX, we have a vehicle now where people can earn scholarships in order to get their education.
When you were talking earlier about the situation down in Memphis with Jay Larson, and you discussed having received telephone calls from parents during, I think it was a Friday evening, is that right?
Sure, yes.
All right. And from how late into the morning hours did you receive calls from parents of student athletes about the investigation?
It was late. We were in Memphis, so we were in the central time zone, and most of our populace was in Pacific time. So later for us, 10, 11, 12.
And you recall some of the conversations that you had with parents?
I do,
And did these conversations upset you?
very much.
And were you still upset the next morning when you saw Mr. Ross?
Objection, this is all leading.
Sustained.
Did your upset cease when you went to sleep?
No,
All right. And do you recall what you learned, why the parents were upset, that in turn upset you?
yes,
What did you learn from the parents who called you?
they,
I'm going to object to culture hearsay, I believe.
Well, it's her state of mind, Your Honor.
Sustained.
It's her state of mind. It's an exception, Your Honor. I'm sorry?
Overruled
To the objection or to me?
to the objection.
Okay, thank you. So, do you understand the question?
so I can speak, or
Yes.
no? Yes.
That's my understanding.
Yes, they were upset, they were hurt, they were humiliated, they felt they were called, and because,
They were upset.
What? Okay, they were upset. Did you learn why they were upset?
yes,
What did you learn?